Hey Potter nerds, it is Kathleen and welcome back to my channel. Welcome if you're new, welcome back if you're not. I've realized that my intro is kind of redundant, but welcome anyway. So you've been welcome 3-4 times. Anyway, in today's video, it is time for another book discussion for the Living Lumos book club. We are doing chapters 7 through 9 of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. I hope that you are enjoying this book club series, and if you are, please let me know down below. I would love to hear you. So it's cool if you don't answer the discussion questions if you don't want to. I just thought it'd be fun for those who would like to do that. But I'd love to also hear your thoughts on the book, so please let me know down below. Or if you, something I've been wanting to tell you every video, but I keep forgetting. If you want to make your own like social media posts on Instagram or TikTok about the Living Lumos book club, or your thoughts on the readings for the week, please post them and use the hashtag Living Lumos book club so that I can see them. You can tag me if you want to, you don't have to. But yeah, I thought that'd be something fun to do if you'd like to participate in that way. Just be able to hear from you more and feel more connected to y'all. So I'm gonna stop rambling, and usually I tell you with my fancy sign to subscribe if you haven't already. First of all, the subscribe light up box sign is dead right now. I need to change the batteries, and when I was looking for it because I couldn't find it, I somehow magically found a teeny tiny shard of glass in my carpet and cut my foot slightly, and it hurts really badly. So once I found it and the batteries were dead, it wasn't even worth looking for it and getting injured for it. So please, for my troubles, subscribe down below. you gotta subscribe now. Pity subscribes. Anyway, I'm gonna start rambling and stop talking, and we'll get straight into the video. Chapter 7, The Sorting Hat. Got my handy notes here. In summary, this chapter takes us through the Hogwarts sorting ceremony, opening feast, and introduces some of the quirks and mysteries of Hogwarts. So where we left off in chapter 6, Hagrid was knocking at the door at the castle, and here we are now. McGonagall is at the door as it swings open. She is described as a stern-looking witch with black hair, a little older. She leads the first years through the entrance hall to a small empty chamber close to the Great Hall. She then explains what the sorting ceremony is, kind of. Doesn't really tell exactly what it is, but says when you go in, you're going to be sorted into your Hogwarts house. And she also talks about the importance of Hogwarts houses. She describes it as your family while you're here at Hogwarts, and while you're at Hogwarts, your good behavior and accomplishments will earn your house points, and any rule breaking, you will lose points for your house, and whoever has the most points at the end of the year gets the Hogwarts House Cup, which is a coveted title. She then leaves them and says she'll be back when it's time for the sorting ceremony. Harry asks Ron how the sorting happens, and Ron says that Fred and George told him some sort of test. And everybody is freaking out, trying to figure out what's going to happen with the sorting. Harry's like, great, I have no magical knowledge. I literally just found I was a wizard like a month ago, and now I have to take a test in front of the entire school. Great. Hermione is trying to figure, she says that she's learned so many things from all the books, and she's trying to figure out what they're going to test her on. So everybody is freaking out. Suddenly, about 20 ghosts enter the room. We see the Fat Friar, and they're kind of just talking among themselves, and they see the first years and interact with them a little bit. And then McGonagall returns to get the first years lined up to go to the Great Hall. So let's talk about the Great Hall, because I love how it looked in the movie, and I love how it's described in the book. So the Great Hall, when you walk in, Harry sees 4 long tables for students, each for each Hogwarts house. There's one long head table at the front for the teachers, above them there are floating candles and a magnificent ceiling that looks like the heavens above. Hermione mentions that she read in Hogwarts the history that it's bewitched to look like the outside sky. And Harry's like, surely not. I mean, this Great Hall looks like it really does open up to the real sky in the heavens. So McGonagall leads them all to the front of the 4 tables where their backs are facing the head table. And she then pulls out a 4-legged stool and puts a pointed wizard's hat on it. And then the sorting hat, which we find out, is an old frayed hat, and it starts singing a song. So I'm going to read it because it's really interesting. And as we read the other books, we learn that its song is usually is different each year. So let me get to that page number. So it is on page 117 in the Sorcerer's Stone American version of the story. Yeah. So I don't know the tune for the song, so I'm just gonna speak it. Oh, you may not think I'm pretty, but don't judge on what you see. I'll eat myself if you can find a smarter hat than me. You can keep your bowlers black, your top hat sleek and tall, for I'm the Hogwarts sorting hat, and I can cap them all. There's nothing hidden in your head the sorting hat can't see, so try me on, I will tell you where you ought to be. You might belong in Gryffindor, where dwelt the brave at heart. Their daring nerve and chivalry set Gryffindors apart. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are... You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Those patient Hufflepuffs are true and unafraid of toil. Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you've a ready mind, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Or perhaps in Slytherin you'll make your real friends. Those cunning folk use any means to achieve their ends. So put me on, don't be afraid, and don't get in a flap. You're in safe hands, though I have none, for I'm a thinking cap. And the Grammy for Best Original Song goes to... So Ron, after hearing this, is so mad at Fred because Fred had told him like he would have to like fight a dragon or something to get sorted. So he was kind of mad about that he was so worried, and all he has to do is put a hat on. So sorting begins with Hannah Abbott, who is alphabetically, so Hannah Abbott, and she gets sorted into Hufflepuff, and ends with Blaise Zabini, who gets sorted into Slytherin. So the first, I'm gonna talk about a few kind of important characters that we see from in the first years being sorted. Hermione gets sorted into Gryffindor, which Ron groans and is pissed about. Draco Malfoy, like the hat barely touches his head, and he gets sorted into Slytherin. Neville gets sorted into Gryffindor, and poor Neville, like he ran away with the hat on his head and had to come back to give it back to the other person. Then we know Ron gets sorted into Gryffindor, but that's after Harry, but I'm just gonna mention it because I like it in the movie. It's funnier because it's like, another Weasley. I know just what to do with you, but he doesn't say that in the book. I think that the movie made that funnier. So Harry, when he puts the hat on, he can hear the hat thinking, and the hat hears him thinking. So it's not really out loud like in the movie, but in the movie it's out loud because that makes more sense. So the hat is, let me pull that page up, because it was actually interesting. On page 121 is when he's getting sorted. So Harry puts on the hat, and a small voice in his ear says, difficult, very difficult. Plenty of courage, I see. Not a bad mind, either. There's talent, oh my goodness, yes. And nice thirst to prove yourself. Now that's interesting. So where shall I put you? And Harry is thinking in his head, not Slytherin, not Slytherin. And then the small voice goes, not Slytherin, eh? Are you sure? You could be great, you know. It's all here in your head. And Slytherin will help you on the way to greatness, no doubt about that. No? Well, if you're sure, better be Gryffindor! That's how the sorting happens. The whole school can't hear what you're thinking, or what the hat's saying to you in your head. So, Harry goes to the Gryffindor table. Percy is super excited to have Harry Potter in Gryffindor. Fred and George are screaming, "We got Potter! We got Potter!" And Harry looks up at the head table and sees Hagrid giving him a thumbs up. He sees Professor Dumbledore and notes how much he looks just like his chocolate frog card. And he sees Professor Quirrell. And I think it's really interesting to mention that in the movie, when Harry meets Professor Quirrell at the Leaky Cauldron, Quirrell already has the turban on in the movie. But apparently, the turban's a new thing when Harry sees him at Hogwarts. He didn't have a turban on in the Leaky Cauldron in the book. Thought that was interesting. Didn't remember that. So he was because he kept saying a very peculiar turban. So Dumbledore, before the feast begins, he says a few short words, and I quote, "Nitwit, blubber, oddment, tweak." The Super Carlin brothers actually have a really good theory about what that means, so I would recommend that video. And the feast begins. On the table, there's just so many things that everybody would ever want to eat. There's potatoes, there's chicken, there's roast beef, there's Yorkshire pudding, like everything that anybody would ever want to eat. And as they're eating, Nearly Headless Nick, who is or Sir Nicholas, the Mimsy, shows up and introduces himself to the new Hogwarts first years and tells them that he is the Gryffindor's resident ghost, and is so excited to meet them. And says, "I hope you'll be an asset to your houses." The Slytherin house has won the Hogwarts House Cup too many years in a row, and the Bloody Bear and their ghost has become just intolerable to be around because he won't stop bragging and teasing Nearly Headless Nick. And Nearly Headless Nick is nicknamed that because when he was killed, he had gotten decapitated, but apparently didn't do a good job because he was still there. He was still attached. So the Gryffindor first years at the feast start talking about family life. We have Seamus Finnegan, who the movie quote's a little bit different than the book quote, but it's very interesting. You know, you have him saying, "I'm half and half. Dad's a muggle. Mom's a witch. Bit of a nasty shot for him when he found out." I'm not a voice impressionist. Don't come for me. And then we also get to hear about Neville's story. We don't really hear that much about it in the book, but we hear about Neville's story, like saying his family is so excited that he's at Hogwarts. They didn't think he'd make it because they thought he was going to be not magical, because he talks about his family like constantly trying to make him like try and scare magic out of him. And one time he accidentally got thrown out the window, and they knew he was magic because he bounced all the way to the garden. I thought that was interesting. Obviously he mentions living with his gran and doesn't really mention his parents, which is important later on. But we get to know more about Neville in the book, which I think that the movies really gave Neville the short stick. Harry overhears Hermione talking about lessons with Percy, of course. And then Harry scans the teacher's table and notices Quirrell talking to a teacher with greasy black hair, a hooked nose, and sallow skin. That's how the book describes Professor Snape. The teacher looks at Harry, and suddenly a sharp hot pain happens across his scar. And Harry puts his hand to his forehead and says, "Ouch." And Percy's like, "What's wrong?" And Harry kind of, said nothing. But it was interesting. He described that the scar pain went away super quickly, but it was the feeling from that teacher's look that lingered. And he learns from Percy that teacher is named Professor Severus Snape, and he's always been out for Quirrell's job. Everybody knows it's the dark arts he fancies, but he's the potions teacher, even though he wants the other job. And now we move on to Dumbledore's announcements. He's telling the first year students that the Forbidden Forest is forbidden for students to go to, and he says, I'm sure some other older students could use a reminder. And he kind of looks over at Fred and George. The second announcement is Phil asked Dumbledore to remind the students that no magic is to be used in corridors between classes. Number 3 announcement, Quidditch tryouts are going on the next week, and talking about Hooch if you're interested in playing for your house team. And the 4th announcement, which is new for everybody, the 3rd floor corridor, there's a forbidden 3rd floor corridor, and I quote, he says, that it's out of bounds for anyone who does not wish to die a painful death. Harry and only a few other people kind of started laughing, thinking he was joking, looked at Percy, and he's like, he's joking, right? And Percy tells him, usually, no, he's not kidding. Usually he gives us a reason why it's forbidden. He never really tells us something's out of bounds without telling us why, which is interesting. Before the feast is over, they end with the school song, which I love the school song. There's apparently a deleted scene from the Goblet of Fire movie about this song, or about Hogwarts singing this song, so I know the tune of it. So I'm gonna sing it for y'all. If you don't want to hear my singing voice, you can skip ahead. So I decided not to sing it because I really don't know the tune. So it's Hogwarts, Hogwarts, Hoggy-Worty Hogwarts, teach us something, please. Whether we be old and bald or young with scabby knees, our heads could do with filling with some interesting stuff. For now they're bare and full of air, dead flies and bits of fluff. So teach us things worth knowing, bring back what we forgot. Just do your best, we'll do the rest, and learn until our brains all rot. What a school song. I don't even remember my college's alma mater song, so. Alright, so with that comes the closing of the feast, which actually, also what's interesting about the song is that in the book, Dumbledore just says, pick your favorite tune and we'll all sing together. So they're not all singing the same tune. They're singing the same song, but not the same tune. And Fred and George picked a slow, like, funeral march, and we're the last ones finishing. and Dumbledore's just living his best life, like, directing. Oh man, sorry. That was I really wish that was in the movie, but obviously not an important detail. So Percy takes the first-year Gryffindors to the Gryffindor common room and dormitories. On the way there, they're going through all these secret passages behind paintings and tapestries. It's really cool. I don't know. I think it's definitely interesting reading about this and just visualizing it in your head. They run into Peeves the poltergeist, who terrorizes the students, and we find out the only person who is afraid, the only thing that can control Peeves is the Bloody Baron, because he's afraid of the Bloody Baron for some reason. So they get to this portrait with a fat lady. That's what they call it, the fat lady portrait. And she asks for a password, which is Cabot Draconis, which I will look up what that means later. So it'll be put here what the translation of that is, because I'm curious about that. I think it's like dragon. It has something to do with dragons. So Harry gets up to his dormitory. I believe there's like 5 beds in his particular dormitory, but I believe there's like several different ones. I don't think there's just 5 first-year Gryffindors boys. So it's him, Ron, Neville, Dean Thomas, and Seamus Finnegan. And they all go to sleep, and Harry has a very strange dream. He's wearing Quirrell's turban, and the turban's talking to him and saying he has to transfer to Slytherin. He tries to take it off, and he can see Malfoy laughing as Harry struggles to take it off. Because the turban just got heavier and heavier. Malfoy suddenly turns into Snape, whose laugh became high and cold, and the dream ends with a burst of green light. And then he wakes up, goes back to sleep, and thinks nothing of it, and forgets it the next morning. For the discussion question for this chapter, what Hogwarts house are you in? Alright, let's get to Chapter 8. Chapter 8, The Potions Master. This chapter encompasses Harry's first week of classes, with most of the focus on his first potions class. The chapter begins with Harry being the hot topic of the school, how people are always like staying on their tiptoes, get a peek at him, saying, "Is that Harry Potter?" And he really wishes they wouldn't, because he's already having enough trouble trying to navigate Hogwarts. There's just so much going on. In my video where I answered your Harry Potter question, someone had asked how many staircases there are at Hogwarts. I now have your answer. There are 140, well, you don't need to see this, 142 staircases at Hogwarts. They're not really described as moving in at least this part of the series in the book. They're described as sometimes they lead to different places, sometimes there's a vanishing step, sometimes there's this trick staircase. I don't know how Hogwarts doesn't have like lawsuits out the wazoo, but you know, you must have to sign several waivers to attend that school. Then there's also the doors. There's doors that lead to nowhere, doors that ghosts just walk out of, and doors that have doorknobs you have to tickle. Like, there's so many like quirks about going to Hogwarts. Sometimes you run into ghosts, sometimes you run into Peeves who will send you the wrong way. One time Harry got into trouble with Filch because he and Ron were accidentally trying to go into the Forbidden Third corridor by accident because they're lost, but he didn't believe them. And Filch, if you don't know, Argus Filch is the caretaker of Hogwarts. I think that's his title. He cleans and he keeps the students in line. He punches the students. He's just kind of the, I wouldn't say janitor. He's like a janitor, but also make sure the students are following rules. And he also has a cat named Mrs. Norris, who somehow, it seems like no matter where she is, if she spots you doing something bad, Filch is there within seconds. He knows all the secret passages better than anybody, even better than Fred and George around Hogwarts, because he seems to be there in 0 seconds flat. So I think my favorite thing was that it's every Hogwarts student's dream to give Miss Norris a good kick. So we kind of get a glimpse into Harry's first week at Hogwarts. He tells us about, or the book tells us that at midnight on Wednesday for the astronomy class or astrology class, they study the night skies. They learn the star's name and chart the planet movements. They have herbology 3 times a week, taught by Professor Sprout. As they describe her, a dumpy woman, rude. They have history of magic with Professor Binns. Professor Binns is the only ghost professor at Hogwarts, and the legend goes that he fell asleep before or during the great teacher room fire. I don't think I'm saying that right. And he woke up and left his body to continue teaching. So I don't think he knows he died. And it's kind of boring. He kind of drones on and on. God, it's familiar to some lectures I've been in, and that is history of magic. They have charms with Professor Flitwick. Professor Flitwick is so happy to have Harry in his class. And then there's transfiguration with McGonagall. Professor McGonagall does not play around. She made it clear that if you play around with transfiguration, with it being so dangerous, and if you're messing around her class, you will not return. She's one of those teachers, and I love Minerva so much. And one of the first transfiguration lessons that they're learning is turning a match into a needle. Then there's defense against the dark arts with Professor Quirrell. His classroom smells like garlic, which people believe, the students have a rumor is to ward off a vampire he ran into in the dark forest during his tenure, his sabbatical from Hogwarts, and he's trying to keep him away. I think it was Albania. I don't remember. I do remember. It's just, there's a lot of details that I didn't write specifically in my notes. in reference to his turban, like I said in the last chapter, it's basically kind of confirmed that he didn't have the turban until Harry sees him again at Hogwarts. He says that the turban was given to him by an African prince after taking care of a zombie. I laughed a little bit because it just seems kind of funny that it seems really phony. And when he says African prince, I can't help but think of the Nigerian prince, like email scams. So both pretty phony stories in my opinion. Fred and George believed that the turban was stuffed with garlic to keep vampires away because there's some sort of odor that lingered from the turban. Friday comes of the last day of the school week for Harry's first week of lessons, and they have double potions with Snape. Ron and Harry are talking about it during breakfast. The mail arrives, and Harry gets a letter from Hagrid inviting him over for tea after class. So he sends back Hedwig and says, "Yes, please." And they go to their first potions class in the dungeon. And Snape, if Harry already thinks Snape doesn't like him because of that look he gave him at the head table during the opening feast. It was very much confirmed that, actually no, it wasn't confirmed that Snape disliked him. It confirms that he hates him in this class. Snape treats Harry like absolute garbage. When Harry's name is on the roll, he says, "Harry Potter, our new celebrity," being rude. And then he starts asking Harry all these potions questions on his first day, knowing he came from the Muggle world, asking all these questions. He asks one question, Harry says, "I don't know," and he's like, "Oh, fame clearly isn't everything, is it, Mr. Potter?" And then he asks another question. And between each question, poor Hermione, is just sitting. Does anybody remember that kid in school that knew the answer and was always just like, ooh, like just so passionate about it? Maybe that was me. Maybe that's why I didn't have many friends. Anyway, she raised her hand, and like at the last one, she's literally like standing on her tiptoes trying to answer the question. And Harry, in the last question, book Harry is sassier than movie Harry, and it makes me sad that there's not as much of Harry's sass in the movies. Hermione he literally says, "I don't know, Professor," but Hermione clearly does. Why don't you try her? And Snape snaps at Hermione to sit back down, and takes a point away from Hogwarts, or takes a point away from Gryffindor for Harry's cheek. And then they finally get to the actual potion making. Snape is criticizing everyone but Malfoy. Neville messes up really bad. Neville and Seamus, I think, are together, working together. Messes up, and suddenly the cauldron wouldn't say explodes, but the liquid starts flowing out of it and just burning holes in the floor, and people are trying to avoid it, and Neville gets covered in boils all over his arm and legs, and Snape is awful. Let's not forget, for all Snape apologists, he bullies children. Just putting that out there. So he says, "Idiot boy," and says he must have added the porcupine quills before taking your cauldron off the burner. So he tells Seamus to take him to the hospital wing, and he looks at him and says, "Potter, why didn't you stop him from doing that? You thought he literally," God, sorry, I'm getting heated because these kids are literally 11 years old. Harry's 11 years old. Neville's 11 years old. He's talking to 11-year-old children like this. He says, you purposely didn't tell him to stop. You wanted to you're hoping he'd make you look good. One more point from Gryffindor House. And before he tried to argue, Ron says, look, Ron's trying to reassure him. He's like, look, Snape hates everybody but Slytherin. Don't take it personally. But Harry felt so bad because he lost Gryffindor to house points. But thankfully they had Ron joins Harry, and they got to go to Hagrid's for tea to make up for that disastrous first potions lesson, or double potions lesson. We see Hagrid's hut and meet Fang, who is Hagrid's dog. Hagrid has tea and rock cakes ready, which are these really hard cakes with raisins in them. I've seen recipes for it, but I'm pretty sure, like, I'm guessing to be edible because I feel like I couldn't make them really hard because I don't want to break my teeth. But if you'd like to see me try and recreate the rock cakes, please let me know down below and I'll make a recipe video one day. Harry and Ron were happy that Hagrid hated Filch as much as they did because they were telling them about their week at school. And he called Filch an old git, and because talking about how Filch was always following him around and how much he hated him and that cat, and said he wished he would like to set Fang loose on Mrs. Norris. They then tell Hagrid about the potions class and Snape and what Snape did to Harry. Hagrid, like Ron, tells Harry not to worry, that Snape doesn't really like any of the students. Harry's like, well, it seems like he hates me. And Hagrid's like, rubbish. There's no reason he would hate you. But Harry notices that Hagrid doesn't make eye contact with him. So he thinks that Hagrid knows more than he's letting on. Hagrid then changes the subject and asks Ron about Charlie Weasley, talking about how much he liked the boy and how much, because Charlie cared so much about magical creatures. During this conversation, Harry notices a cutting from the Daily Prophet on Hagrid's table. It is about the break-in at Gringotts. I'm gonna read that for y'all because I think that the article is interesting and I can't remember it off the top of my head. Also, I want to compliment this book. I really love this book because you can kind of see at the bottom here, it has handwriting of Hagrid writing a letter. When it has articles, it has these neat headlines. And I don't know, it feels like you just have these little snippets, kind of like replicas almost within your book. Maybe that's just me, but that's something I really appreciate. A little detail. Oh, sorry, I slipped. A little detail in the book. So Gringotts break-in latest. Investigations continue into the break-in. Oh, by the way, this is bottom of page 141, top of 142 in this edition of the Harry Potter first book. Gringotts break-in latest. Investigations continue into the break-in at Gringotts on July 31st. Widely believed to be the work of dark wizards and witches unknown. Gringotts goblins today insisted that nothing had been taken. The vault that was searched had in fact been emptied the same day. But we're not telling you what was in there, so keep your noses out if you know what's good for you, said a Gringotts spokesgoblin this afternoon. Gosh, my stuttering is so bad today. So that is everything as far as that article. Harry asked Hagrid about it because we were just there that day. It was on my birthday. They could have been robbing while or breaking in right when we were there, right after we were there before. And Hagrid kind of avoids eye contact about it. And Harry starts wondering about the package from Vault 713 because they had emptied that vault that day. So his mind gears are starting to turn about these weird mysteries that seem to revolve around Hogwarts and Hagrid, or the little package that Hagrid picked up. So discussion question for chapter 8. What class would you be most excited to take at Hogwarts? Now, let's get straight to chapter 9. Chapter 9, The Midnight Duel. This chapter shows us the building up of Harry and Malfoy's rivalry, and it also goes more in depth of the mysteries of Hogwarts. Just a little bit. Harry never thought he'd meet any other boy he hated more than Dudley. Then he met Draco Malfoy. Thankfully, he only dealt with Malfoy and the other first-year Slytherins and potions until it is announced that Gryffindor and Slytherin would be doing flying lessons together. Malfoy always brags about being an excellent flyer. Seamus and Ron are also kind of bragging about being good flyers. Seamus saying he flew across the countryside. Ron saying he narrowly missed a person hang gliding through the sky. Typical I'm such a good flyer, and trying to build themselves up, even though probably none of them have flew more than a few feet in the air. Neville and Hermione both are nervous about flying. Neville had never flown, which Harry thought in his mind probably a good thing because Neville seems to have all these accidents. And Hermione is nervous because it's the one thing she can't learn completely by reading a book. At breakfast the day of flying lessons, Hermione gives everyone tips from a book she read called Quidditch Through the Ages from the library. Every tip that she can find. Luckily, Harry is so relieved when the mail starts arriving, so he can stop listening to Hermione. They're real crapheads to Hermione, by the way, towards the beginning of this. I mean, they were in the movie too, but they're real jerks to Hermione. She is kind of annoying though, in parts of the book. Mail starts arriving, and Neville gets a special package from Miss Grant. When she opens it is this little globe that has silver, or this glass ball, and it's called a Remembrall. So what happens with a Remembrall is that the smoke inside turns red when you've forgotten something, and it turned red for Neville. And my favorite part in the book was interesting, or not in the book, in the movies. In the movies, he is holding the Remembrall, and it turns red. He's like, thing is, can't remember what it is I've forgotten. And I saw a meme. There's a meme going around that what he forgot was his robes, because everybody else is wearing robes but him in the Great Hall. So that might be it, but I think that's... I'm wondering if it's that, or if that... I don't know. What do you think that Neville forgot more in the movies? Or even in the book? What do you think he forgot? Anywho, Malfoy with Crabbe and Goyle in tow snatches the Remembrall from Neville. And is like, what's this? And Harry and Ron were like, yeah, they were wanting a reason to fight Malfoy, even though almost like, you guys are all 11 and tiny. Anyway, but McGonagall appeared very quickly. She seems to be able to spot trouble, and Draco gives the Remembrall back. Malfoy, I'm just gonna call him Malfoy right now. Malfoy gives the Remembrall back when McGonagall comes around. So now it's time for flying lessons. Madame Hooch is the flying instructor at Hogwarts. She is described as having white, grayish hair with yellow eyes like a hawk. I think that she, in the movie, like, I think they did a really good job casting, but Madame Hooch looks awesome. I wish we saw more of her in the movies. Like, all of them. So Madame Hooch instructs everyone to step up beside one of the brooms lying on the ground. There's about 20 lying on the ground. And this is when they're learning broom summoning. So they say up, they put their hand above it and say up. Harry's broom immediately jumps into his hand. Lots of students are having trouble with it, but his flew immediately into his hand. Then they learn the proper way to mount a broom. And Harry and Ron love that Madame Hooch told Malfoy he had been doing it wrong for years. Then we get to the hovering lesson, that's what I'm going to call it. Madame Hooch instructs them to kick off, to be able to take off, rise a few feet, and then land firmly back down on their feet, not to rise too high. Before she even blows her whistle, Neville starts floating and rising too high and can't stop, and then falls straight down and breaks his wrist. So Madame Hooch takes them to the hospital wing, and before she leaves, she tells everyone to stay on the ground, and if she saw any broom in the sky, you'll be even if you move, you'll be expelled before you can say Quidditch. Then this is when the showdown between Malfoy and Harry happens in the air, like we see in that scene in the movie. Malfoy finds that the Neville's Remembrall had fallen from him, and he takes it and says, "I'm gonna leave it somewhere nice for him." And Harry tries to give it back. So with the Remembrall in hand, Malfoy flies into the air and says he's going to leave it in a tree somewhere for Neville to find. Harry then grabs his broom, and Hermione's like, "Stop, you heard Madame Hooch, you're going to get us all in trouble." And Harry just ignores her, and for the first time on a broom, Harry successfully is flying around. Malfoy's a pretty good flyer, even, kind of living up to his bragging, but Harry is an excellent flyer for his first time on a broom. That's something that's really neat, knowing, considering he didn't have any experience with the Dursleys and any that we know of right now in his short time with his actual parents. Harry is a really good flyer. So the showdown begins between Malfoy and Harry. Malfoy has a little bit more than he bargained for. And Harry's like, you don't have Crabbe and Goyle up here with you. Hand it over. So Malfoy throws it to the ground, and Harry like built up speed and is diving. He catches it and then pulls up and lands before he crashes into the ground. He like straight up nosedives. That's something that's pretty advanced, I would imagine, for flying lessons. Thinking that, and suddenly he hears Harry Potter yelled, and Minerva McGonagall catches him, and because she saw everything, and starts to take Harry with her. The Gryffindors start trying to stand up for him, trying to explain what happened to him, but she didn't want to hear it. And I'm guessing at that time Malfoy must have landed, and so he couldn't get in trouble. Harry, as he's following her, thinks he's going to be expelled, but instead of being taken to Dumbledore's office or something, she takes him to Professor Quirrell's, or was it Professor Flitwick in the book's classroom, and she asks for someone named Oliver Wood, and she introduces Harry to him. He is a 5th-year Gryffindor and captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team. And she tells him, Wood, I have found you a seeker. And says he made a 50-foot dive on his first flying lesson. And she saw him catch that. She showed him this, that he caught this diving for 50 feet in the air. And Oliver Wood, I wish he had gotten more screen time. Oliver Wood is so excited. Like, I don't think anyone loves Quidditch more than Oliver Wood. I'm just gonna put it right here. He's measuring up Harry, saying, oh, he's the perfect size too. And McGonagall says, I'm so tired of listening to, basically she's tired of Severus Snape smack talking her about Slytherin winning the Quidditch House Cup every year. So she finally, it's like, I think we might have a chance this year to beat Slytherin. And she tells Harry, now I hope to hear that you're training hard and taking it seriously, or I might change my mind of punishing you. So he basically gets rewarded for disobeying Madame Hooch by being allowed on the the Gryffindor Quidditch team, when first years don't really make the house teams. So later on at supper, Harry is telling Ron about it, and Ron's super excited, and they're both excited because Harry is the youngest student to make the Quidditch team in a century. And Malfoy is stunned to see Harry at dinner because he thought for sure he managed to get Harry expelled. So with Crabbe and Goyle also in tow, he then challenges Harry to a wizard's duel at midnight in the trophy room, saying he has his second is, or Ron says he'll be a second. And he said, who's your second? And Malfoy chooses Crabbe to be a second. What a second is in wizard dueling is if one of the wizards in the duel dies, the second takes the place of him. They're 11 years old. I'm just saying. I don't think when I was reading as a kid, I'm not thinking about their age because I was basically their age. But these are 11-year-olds. Hermione overhears this arrangement, and I'm gonna put overhears, probably eavesdropping, and is kind of like, you better not do that. You can't sneak out at midnight. Nah, nah, nah. I mean, she's being logical, but she's also kind of annoying. So about 11:30 that night, in their dormitories, Harry and Ron start sneaking out, but as they are crossing the threshold of the common room and getting close to the opening to get out of the common room, they are caught by Hermione, who is waiting for them in an armchair. Like, she turns the lights on. She's like that mom that waits for you if you break curfew, which I never did, so I don't know, but I imagine that's what it's like. She tries to talk them out of it, saying, you guys are so selfish. How can you be so selfish? You're going to lose so many points. You're going to lose all the points that I got from in McGonagall's class for knowing about blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry. I mean, she's right, but, she's kind of written to be unlikable in this part of the book. As Hermione is following them out of the portrait, or out from behind the portrait portrait shuts, and she tries to go back. She says the password Pigsnout, and the fat lady is not in the painting to let her in. So she gets locked out of the common room and decides to tag along. And they're saying, why are you going with? No, you can't go with us. She's like, well, I'm not going to sit here and wait for Filch to find me. I'm going to go with you, so that way if Filch does find us, I can I can tell him what happened. I was trying to stop you and you guys can back me up. I'm like, the logic here. I think she just wanted to tag along because she wanted to see if Harry actually could she actually wanted to see a wizard duel between 11-year-olds. Then before they can even leave, they hear a snoring sound. And apparently Neville was asleep outside outside of the common room because he couldn't remember the password. So he tags along as well because he's too scared of the ghost because the Bloody Baron's already been bit 3 times. So the 4 of them all together sneak around the castle. They reach the trophy room, but Malfoy and Crabbe weren't there. And they waited around and they never showed. Then suddenly they hear something and it's not Malfoy and Crabbe. It's Filch and Mrs. Norris. Thus begins a scene of the 4 of them hiding and sneaking away from Filch and Mrs. Norris. They are slowly trying to inch away so he doesn't find them in the trophy room. And when they're getting pretty far away enough, then suddenly Neville just bolts and crashes into Ron. They crash into a suit of armor and it causes all of this noise. And then they're just like, screw it, stop. We're not sneaking around anymore. We don't have time for that. Let's just all run and as fast as they can. And when they finally get far enough away, I believe that they're outside of the charms classroom in that corridor. Hermione tells Harry, he's like, how Malfoy tricked you, right? He probably planned all this and told Filch that there was going to be students out of bed in the trophy room. And Harry's like, Harry was thinking this too, but he would never tell Hermione that she's right. And they're starting to, they feel like the coast is clear. They're far enough away from Filch and Mrs. Norris. Then in comes Peeves, who also didn't get enough screen time because they didn't get any. I know that they had him cast in the first movie, but they just cut him out, I guess for budgeting concerns. But Peeves then finds them, and he's like, oh, ickle firsties, sneaking out, naughty, and they're trying to be like, no, don't tell anybody, and he's trying to say, you gotta say it nicely, and trying to tease them, and Ron says, get out of our way, and then he'd done it, and Peeves starts screaming, students out of bed, outside the charms room in this corridor, blah, blah, and just being a complete jerk, and they ran, and the only door they found to go through was locked. Hermione uses Alohomora to open it, and then as they're inside, they hear Filch finding Peeves and saying, Filch is like, which way did they go? And Peeves says, I'll tell you nothing. I'll tell you nothing unless you say please. If you say please, I'm not saying anything until I'm not saying nothing until you say please, something like that. He worded it so funny for a reason, and Filch finally rolls his eyes and goes, please, and says, ha, I told you I'm trying to tell you nothing when you said please, and basically trolls him, and Filch just kind of walks off guessing he probably just walks off thinking Peeves was pranking him. Inside the locked door where they thought they were safe was the forbidden 3rd floor corridor. They had stumbled into it. So that's how they get to the forbidden section. It wasn't the moving staircase that put them there by accident, like in the movie. They stumbled into it. And in this room was a giant corridor door was a giant 3-headed dog. And between Filch and death, Harry chose Filch. So they ran out of the room and they didn't see Filch, and they didn't stop running until they reached the Fat Lady portrait. And the Fat Lady's like, what are you guys doing out of bed? And they're like, never mind. Pig snout. And she lets them in, and they quickly go inside the common room and collapse into the armchairs. Ron is freaking out, wondering why that would be locked up in Hogwarts. I mean, that's a pretty decent question. Why does the school have a murderous 3-headed dog among all the other things, right? Among all the other safety hazards. Hermione finally, once she caught her breath, her temper returned, and said, if you guys don't use your eyes, do you? You didn't see what I was standing on. And they were like, I wasn't looking on its feet. And she said, it was standing on a trap door, so it's guarding something. And then she says the famous line, now, if you two don't mind, I'm going to bed, for either you got another clever idea to get us killed, or worse, expelled. Sorry, I love that quote. Once she goes off the bed and Harry starts thinking about the trapdoor and begins to wonder if he now knew exactly where the package from Vault 713 was. And that is where chapter 9 ends. And for the discussion question, would you be a student that sneaks out after curfew, or would you be a good student that stays? Would you explore the castle and break the rules, or would you stay in? That's the question. So those are all the chapters that we are going to discuss today. So that is it for this video. Thank you so much for sticking around if you're still here. I know that these videos are pretty long, but I don't want to skimp on any details, and I still feel like I forget details just because there's so many in the books and so many that you rediscover when you read the books again, or if you're reading for the first time, you're discovering a lot of details. So I hope that you are enjoying the format of these videos and enjoying getting to hear basically kind of my thoughts in a way on the book, or my interpretation of the books. I don't know. I'm really enjoying doing this series. I'm enjoying like just doing like a very in-depth reading, because like I say, I read the books, I read the chapters through by themselves, and then I read them again another time to take notes. So let me know what you do down below for reading Harry Potter books. What's your favorite way of doing it? Do you play Harry Potter music during it? Do you have a nice cup of tea? Tell me what your reading style is, or reading setup is, down below. I'd love to hear it. Give this video a big thumbs up if you are enjoying this series. So I think that is the end. Thank you so much for always bringing Lumos to my life, and let's continue to live Lumos every day. Bye.